Welcome to SCOD class. This is the section on philosophy. First, I will begin by introducing this fashion sense to you, which is a combination of punk rock and Spanish Menorcan heritage, not to be confused with the South American freedom fighters. This beret is an American Army beret given to me by a friend that was in the Army when I served in the Air Force. I wear it with pride and with an expression of artistic freedom. I wear this punk rock style East German military uniform where I've drawn my own emblems over top of their flag. In a postmodern sense, I'm various forms of self-expression, like Ghostbusters and one of my Air Force patches, and here I have one of my G.I. Joe badges, and this was a high school badge. I believe that every day is Halloween, and you should be able to wear your costume that is an expression of who you are freely in a free society. My grandfather wore berets, and musicians can wear berets, and anybody can wear a beret. Just because you are not around people that wear berets or are not familiar with berets or wearing old military clothing, doesn't mean that other people can't wear that. I try to invite them to open up their consciousness, but a lot of times that's not really the point. The point is that they're trying to bully because you look, too weird or odd or different. So this is the reason for the punk rock movement, is to rebel against that kind of dogmatic assertion of authoritarianism. So, whatever, they can call me names. I can call them names. That's their prerogative. So, okay. This section on philosophy begins. In many ways, philosophy covers psychology, politics, religions, ethics, morality, sciences, and environmentalism. Philosophy is important because it is our attempts to explain patterns of thought and action. As theories, some are harder to prove than others, and this distinguishes science from philosophy a lot of times. Philosophical theories in architecture explain how and why we build certain ways and suggest new ways. Psychology can help us to modify our thoughts and behaviors to better achieve goals in life. There are various philosophies of psychology to better suit the diversity of humanity. Even sciences like psychiatry were developed from the writings and teachings of ancient philosophers and medieval alchemists, so it is from the beginning that our studies start here. With SCOD. Psychology is a philosophy that seeks to understand human thoughts and behaviors. If we learn from psychology, we can build architecture better suited for us. And we can talk about terminology and how that's changed, such as arts and sciences. They're used in different ways now than they were. And people have different semantics in mind when they say those words. Men have dominated history and modes of thought in religion and philosophy. In New Age, more women should be supported to express and record their thoughts. These modes of thought can be used to express civil rights. Be not afraid, women. Philosopher kings and queens, and I try to add more and refine the list, but basically these are some of my favorites. In Asia, Lao Tzu, Sun Tzu, Buddha, and Confucius. There's Hebrew, Christian, and Muslim ones, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. The Greeks are, for me, Thales, Pythagoras, Empedocles, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Epicurus, Euclid, and Archimedes. In science, Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, Einstein. And for the Celts, there's Boudica. Women. The Romans, there's Cicero, Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, Marcus Aurelius with the Stoics. In the Middle Ages, there's King Arthur, Saint Francis, Thomas Aquinas, Renaissance, modern. Machiavelli, Francis Bacon, Hobbes, Locke, Descartes, Hegel, Hume, Kant, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Gandhi, Marx, Jung, and that gets into phenomenology, which is, to a large part, what SCOD Thesis is. So there are 7 ancient sages. The classical philosophies of ancient Greeks are the first on historic record to start asking the most basic yet profound questions in life, about life, the universe, and everything. Modern philosophies tend to ask more complex questions about our existences in existence, and many of the basic questions are redefined by scientific theories. It is wise to know past examples of thought, although we are capable of coming to many of the same conclusions without having read them, or may have already formulated some similar theories independently. For this thesis, the 7 chosen Greeks are Thales, Pythagoras, Empedocles, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and Epicurus. Thales. Thales is considered the father of philosophy. He lived in Miletus in eastern Greece, across the Aegean Sea, in Ionia, now western Turkey, together with his contemporary philosophers Anaximander and Anaximenes, around 600 BC. Yes, that's a long time ago. He founded the first school of philosophy. Before them, all things were explained only through the religion of the Greek gods, which were anthropomorphic spirits of nature and ancestors. Religions survived, of course, but so did other ways of thought and reasoning, now called the philosophies. Thales believed the essence of the world was water and combined astronomy, logic, and mathematics to find answers. Anaximander thought that all things came from epeiron, which were unlimited invisible atomic elements, which then made the 4 basic elements of nature: air, fire, water, and earth. Anaximenes then believed that the ultimate expression of this atomic element was air. Heraclitus believed that fire was the prime element. This was not just the birth of philosophy, but also science and psychology. And a lot of times, scientists will say fire is not a element; it's a chemical reaction. It's a reaction. Okay, but this is before specialists developed standards for talking about each of these things in more depth. Pythagoras was from Samos, Ionia, circa 500 BC. He was a spiritual mathematician and philosopher, lover of wisdom. He made mystical world travels and used music and math together as a language to understand the universe. The triangle was his sacred symbol. He believed in reincarnation and interconnected transmigration. Empedocles. Empedocles of Sicily, circa 450 BC, is considered a pluralist because he believed that all things were interconnected, even seemingly opposing philosophies. His open-minded theories embraced the 4 elements, or roots: reincarnation, magnetism, and mixture and separation, or love and strife. He wrote in hexameter verse based on Parmenides and the ancient oral tradition of Homeric bards. He was from a family of democratic social leaders, but humbly refused political power himself. He had mystical powers over nature and public powers of oration. His beliefs were eclectic, ranging from mystical traditions of Orphism to progressive observations that influenced Aristotle and led to modern science. Love and strife, or attraction and repulsion, was very similar to the Asian yin-yang concept. The Genesis sphere was what the 2 powers and 4 roots came from, and what they would eventually reform into. We may feel we know things when viewing them from one perspective, but senses alone do not give truth without thought and reasoning. He compromised between the 2 opposing philosophies of Parmenides and Heraclitus. Static monism versus changing flux led Empedocles to develop a theory of constant dynamic plurality, using philia and nikos, love and strife, she and he, opposites. Everything changes by remingling, but all the basic elements are gods that never change. They're immortal. Empedocles believed our immortal souls fell from paradise to perpetually be reincarnated into various animal bodies, until eventually returning to bliss, and Plato will pick up on this later. Birth and death were mixing and separating the four roots plus a human soul. All things were a remingling of what was already mingled and separated before. There is nothing new in reality, only changes and mixtures between basic elements. All living things contain spirits. Being a vegetarian is better than eating meat because animal souls are so similar. Things like that. Empedocles committed suicide by jumping into the volcano of Mount Etna. Thus he immortally changed to his next form of existence. There is some debate, of course, among scholars as to historical accuracy in dealing with these stories. The next three philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, are as famous as their three Renaissance counterparts, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. It was the last artist, Raphael, that painted all of them eventually in his masterpiece, The School of Athens. Socrates. Socrates was from Athens, Greece, circa 400 BC. He was a philosopher, stonemason, soldier, and mentor. He was considered a public gadfly because he would stand around the Stoa and engage random people in his pedagogy by method of dialogue, which involved asking questions to arrive at truths. Socratic dialogue uses deductive reasoning to advance epistemology. Although the Delphi oracle said that none was wiser than Socrates, Socrates believed that this was only because he was more aware of his own ignorance than most people. Socrates annoyed prominent Athenians so greatly they put him on trial and sentenced him to death in a democracy, which he accepted despite his suggestion that they pay him for his public services instead. The ultimate punk rock philosopher. His dialectic method of inquiry supported his assertions that knowledge equals virtue, questions lead to excellence, and knowledge of self, friendship, and community was more important than pursuit of material wealth. He refused to be a career politician because he did not feel comfortable telling others how to live when he himself was not sure. He called his intuition on matters of courage and honesty his inner daemon. I only know that I know nothing. As the Delphi oracle says, know thyself, and the unexamined life is not worth living. His golden rules might be, do not do unto others what angers you if done to you by others, which is a sort of a silver rule. Be kind to everyone as though they were fighting a hard battle. And he also did not write books because he thought that by fixing a word into a certain thing, it eliminates a lot of the great potential that philosophy has through verbal dialogue. And that was very similar to Druids and the Celtic philosophies. Plato. Plato was a student and biographer of Socrates, circa 380 BC. He developed his own theories of reality, metaphysics, mathematics, logic, ethics, and epistemology, which Aristotle, his student, would then elaborate upon. The material world is an illusion based on the real world of archetypal forms. He describes the state like a human. Appetite equals workers, heart equals warriors, head equals government. Plato believed that philosopher kings who love truth should govern republics, not ignorant democratic masses. Plato believed, and the reason for that is because he believed that most people don't ask important questions like philosophers do to arrive at relative truths that can be applied wisely, or knowledge that can be applied for the betterment of all humanity and the people of that particular government. Plato seems to be what we consider now somewhat conservative, as he advocated republican rule by an aristocracy above all else, and preferred tyranny to democracy, at least if we were to read his work literally. Plato also held contempt for astronomers, artisans, and art in general, although that's debatable. And you have to wonder when he advocates the Greek tradition of infanticide, a term that we don't usually say nowadays, but basically if there's a mutation or retardation in your child, that means putting them to death or leaving them out to die. I don't agree with that. The allegory of the cave. Chained inside, we think the shadows on the wall are reality. I can talk more about Plato later. Aristotle. Aristotle, circa 340 BC, was a student of Plato and mentor to Alexander the Great. Aristotle studied all subjects and advocated learning from analyzing experiences and observations in existence. His empirical theories were unparalleled for over 2,000 years and laid the basis for existentialism. He believed in the 4 basic elements, and the 5th, aether, or ether, a heavenly spirit, or air, type of spiritual substance. Maybe sometimes more like a liquid, actually. He determined 4 causalities, 2 modes of causation. Substance is unified matter and form, and universal ideas are not more real than physical objects, because the idea of an object comes from particular objects. Ethics were practical and follow logic, organon. So he built upon Plato's theories, largely. And they both had schools in Athens. He also collected Aesop fables, riddles, proverbs, and folklore, which accounts for some of his hypocritical errors in sciences, as well as, we believe, his students may have been taking notes which resulted in the books. So he may have not actually written some of the books, which is a constant problem in history to determine who actually wrote what. Friend to all is friend to none. All paid jobs absorb and degrade the mind. Virtue is justice. And that's in response to the sophists, who I can talk about at another time. Happiness is the meaning of life. Common danger unites enemies. Plato may have been more popular in ancient Rome, but Aristotelian philosophy was dominant among scholars from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, and was only later replaced by Newtonian theories and the transcendentalism of Kant. And both Muslims and Christians seem to love Aristotle. Epicurus. Epicurus of Samos, circa 300 BC, believed in happiness, tranquility, peace, comfort, and communal and individual contentment. I will pick up there next time. Thank you. Stay strong and keep thinking.